Everyone to the Tuesday, August 26th Long Lake Township Planning Commission regular meeting. Let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have a roll call, please?
Here. Here.
Here. Thank you. I would like to say that this is the Dan end of the table. So just say Dan and see which one answers. Okay, approval of agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to add to the agenda? So that, Cody, this is not something different. This is just the part that goes in here for local business?
The paperwork on your desk is the update from the zoning ordinance update that we did, and I'll go over that through the planner's report.
Okay, thank you.
I move to approve it. Support.
Paulson and Vershave. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any conflicts of interest tonight that should be brought out? Anything on the agenda that anyone feels they have a conflict of interest with? No? Okay, then we will move on. Public comment. Ladies, you want to say anything? Okay, I'm shocked.
I'm Chris Crew, 3016 Collier Road. So on the ADU discussion, I would throw back on the table that at least if you, I think it's a great idea, first of all, but if you look at doing an ADU, see if we can maintain the intent of what residential, single-family residential looks like by at least having 2 times the minimum size being that for an accessory dwelling unit if you're going to add one. So it's 1 acre parcels. So if you're going to put an ADU on, you should at least have 2 acres. That way, if somebody does go down the path eventually and splits it, that it's not going to look like you're not going to be stuck with an ADU on your property. That would maintain the integrity and the intent of what a single-family residential is. The question and topic on the permeable materials in lake residential, if we're looking at impervious surfaces as being something to minimize, to help restrict or help limit and prevent things like washout into the lake and pollution from the lake, there's other things to consider in that whole picture. I have a lakeside residential. I have all sorts of things that I've done to the hill to prevent washout, in addition to maintaining a nice huge buffer down at the lake with all sorts of foliage. I would like to expand my deck a little bit, not because I want to have more space, but because I want to make sure that I can get off my deck in case of fire, or out of my house in case of fire. But the way to do that right now is I could put in 5-foot wide landings and exits, and I could get 300 additional square feet or feet of decking out. It'd look crazy, but I could do it. Property that doesn't do things like maintain the integrity of their hill has all sorts of the stairways and things like that going down, and it looks, and they've been allowed and have done a lot of clear cutting. So if you're trying to continue and maintain and keep the lakes from getting full of contaminant, things like the amount of clearing that gets done on a lake or on lakeside property, the amount of stuff down by the lake shore. There's a property on Mickey Lake right now where they pulled all the trees out of the wood or out of the water. They pulled all the roots. They clear cut the whole thing. They pulled all the roots all the way back up, and it looks. We call it Mount Mickey. It looks awful, and it doesn't look like anything else on the rest of the lake. He's got all sorts of stone retaining walls. He's got grass and some other things, but it doesn't maintain. He's going to have washout eventually. I'm not going to have washout. I haven't had it since we had the 100-year rains a few years back. Other people are going to have the same problem because they pulled all the stumps out of their hills. So there are other things to consider, maybe a combination of things instead of just one thing that says you can only have 300 square feet in the area, you can only be back 50 feet. But if it's permeable, it's permeable. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thanks. Correspondence, you'll all see that we have the Township of Elmwood is doing their master plan and did their notification for us about that. Approval of minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from last month?
I have no issues, and I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Support.
Wagner, Wyand, thank you. Any other further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Nope. Okay, motion carries. We have no postponed business, we have no public hearings, we have no pending business, but we do have new business. So accessory dwelling units, review and discussion. Cody, do you want to kind of lead off with your memo?
Certainly. So ADUs has been a topic of priority set by the Planning Commission for 2026. As most of you were a part of or ancillary to, the Planning Commission did quite a bit of work on ADUs last year, went through a few revisions of a zoning ordinance amendment, completed that in September and recommended a zoning ordinance amendment to the Township Board. Township Board reviewed that in January of 2026 at their regular scheduled meeting that month, and voted to deny to adopt that zoning ordinance amendment. After that time frame, when Planning Commission was working on its annual report, part of that is 2026 priorities. The 7 of you asked for that to be listed as a priority, so it's coming back onto your agenda for further discussion tonight. The memo that I wrote up, hopefully you've all had a chance to read. We used a transcribing tool to get a transcription from the board meeting in January, so we could have an objective view of their viewpoint on that. Dan Wagner, you might be able to speak a little better, more human to it than I did maybe in my memo. As far as their opinion on it, the summary is that the zoning ordinance amendment that was presented to the Township Board was too broad in scope. It allowed it in every zoning district, it allowed it as use by right, so it was a blanket approach, and a majority of the trustees had an issue with that, and that's part of the reason for declining that amendment. So as you discussed tonight, the decision you want to do moving forward, whether that is to tailor that in or to forget it altogether, just keep those in mind as you're working forward for that.
Okay, Dan, do you want to say anything?
I'd be glad to. I mean, obviously, I only represent, one of the 7 voices, but I think I've been extremely transparent with this group about, my personal thoughts on this, and anticipated that this was not going to get supported at the Township Board level, and made it abundantly clear that I would voice my opposition to it to the board. So I was not at all surprised that it ended the way it did. I think that there's not information that really had been conveyed to the board level to keep them informed as the Planning Commission had worked through that. I'm not trying to assign blame to anybody. I mean, the Township Board members could just easily come to these meetings as, the Planning Commission could come to theirs. So, but I can tell you I was a little surprised when I became the liaison, representative on the Planning Commission from the board to see the direction that the Planning Commission was going, and as I've mentioned before, shame on me maybe for not paying better attention to that. But I will tell you, I did feel like my concerns were felt by the majority of the board members, and I think that a more manageable approach that would be supported at the Township Board level would be to try this, and maybe one of the zoning districts that have the largest, I think, parcel minimum size is some sort of a a way to do a wet run, if you will, on this before entertaining something that would, for example, allow an ADU to be built on every conforming parcel in the whole township. So I'm glad to, talk more about some of the things that I know I shared at least once with this group and with some of you individually, about my concerns about how I feel like it could really rewrite the whole character of some of our single-family subdivision type neighborhoods by allowing ADUs. I know some of the township board members expressed concern about attached versus detached. I personally don't really have that same distinction. I'm a little bit more concerned with taking a traditional single-family subdivision type setting and individually making singular parcels multifamily. I know that this has been in other communities. I know East Bay Township had, come up, that they've had it on their books for a while and they haven't really experienced problems, so that's good to hear. As the cost of housing becomes more and more restrictive in our area, I think we all are very aware of that. We all want to be responsible to that and try and provide opportunities for folks to do it, but not at the penalty of folks that have just been minding their own business and paying their taxes for decades, so. That's kind of it in a nutshell. So I mean, it would be my encouragement to this group that we try and do something in a district that has larger parcels where the impact would be less likely to be felt by numerous surrounding property owners as a way to kind of kick the tires on this thing and go from there. Timing of it isn't great with the ADUs. I think we all need to be conscious of the fact that, our community, no different than any other community, particularly throughout Northwest Michigan, we're dealing with these short-term rental issues, that come up from time to time. That particular topic's been pretty quiet at the township board level recently.
Because I'm not going to the meetings.
Well, my
Just
sense
kidding.
is that the rental market has really cooled. I feel like the cost for that has just gotten so restrictive that a lot of folks are they're not willing to spend $5,000 to go rent a little 2-bedroom cottage on Long Lake anymore. It's just, folks just aren't doing it. So I don't think it's been as bad, but using some of these, examples that have been brought forward to us, like, where Chris lives there in Edgewood, the conversion, I can't remember the number, but literally every single parcel that's come up for sale in the last couple of years has been converted to a short-term rental. So there's been some conflicts that I feel would be similar in nature with the development of ADUs in those similar settings.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dennis, Bob, you were also at the board meeting, weren't you?
Yeah.
Why don't we start with Dennis? Do you have anything you wanted to add to what you heard at the board meeting?
Well, I thought one of the points was overcrowding, okay? And so I've been giving thought to that, and, if we try to pick a particular zoning, then you penalize other zoning areas. So one of the things I thought could work and wouldn't limit it to one area of the township or one particular zoning would be have minimum lot size. So if you took, and then that may penalize others, but anyway, if you took, say, for example, a minimum of 2 acres, then you're going to knock out a lot of lots in the township that can do it. Lake Residential's 1 acre, and then low-density residential is 1 acre. You wouldn't be able to do that on the typical conforming lot, only if it were larger. We have conservation lots that are, 5 acres? Is that what they are? And I don't remember the acreage of all the various, but you wouldn't be able to do it in low density, but we've already taken care of that by virtue of the fact that it's low density. Then I began to think about, well, those that have 1 acre lots, what do you do? Well, maybe that's where you consider doing it attached, so that it's not a separate dwelling. You can't sell it separately. And that. What is the definition, as you brought up before, what is the definition of a duplex? So there's things to look at, but I think we can get where we want to go with this and make housing available.
Bob?
Yeah, my comments are similar to Dennis's. I mean, that's kind of what I heard too, is that just a blanket allowance in all the districts would be too much. I think if we can do something to craft it that larger lots could do in a detached, maybe something like what Chris has mentioned in her comments. And I like, the idea of, the smaller lots, they could do attached. Attached could probably be available in all the districts. I think I was kind of picking up, and I haven't gone back and rewatched the meeting, but it seemed like maybe that would be a minimal point to start with board members, is maybe an attached type of ADU program. So, but yeah, I think it's just housing in the region it's tough for people, young people, to launch from this area. It's difficult, and it's something that we really need to get implemented in one way or another.
Dan Paulson, I'm going to wait a second for you because I want to talk about you weren't at the board meeting, were you? No. May I? Okay. Oh, wait. Okay, but it's something you want to continue talking about. So some of the things I had were, I heard the comment that, and Dan, some of this might have been you, but so just bear with me if I didn't specifically quote you. But what you think you're buying into a single-family neighborhood and then you find you're not. I know that with short-term rentals, that kind of felt that way in a lot of ways. There were some questions about what happens if there's shared driveways that have to be approved. That wasn't included in there. How do we protect existing neighborhoods? There was limiting zoning districts with higher acreage. I got to tell you, I actually thought about almost the opposite. And where duplexes are allowed, does it make more sense to at least to do them? So I don't know. And then do ADUs mean that this is a question, do ADUs mean that you have to live there, and how is that not the same as multifamily or duplexes? So there was a real repeated misunderstanding about the difference between an accessory dwelling unit and a duplex. Concern about upzoning every neighborhood, you could have twice as many. If we start adding more housing to every neighborhood, that could change everything. And then there were some comments from a couple of the the board members that they didn't think anybody cared about it. I will tell you, since then, other commissioners or board members have come up to me and said, I do care about it. So I don't think that they want us to stop any more than Dan does. So some of the things I thought of that night were not explaining how accessory dwelling units actually do fit into the master plan, where they're called out. They just there isn't language that says accessory dwelling unit, but there are descriptions of that, like expanding housing choices and affordability. We need to better explain when possible separate living quarters would become an ADU for the purposes of zoning permission. So right now, guys, can you add a second kitchen in your basement? Yes. Okay. So let's say I put a second kitchen in my basement. I have stairs that go down. I have a family room. I have a bathroom. I have an office that could be a bedroom, right? I could have myself an accessory dwelling unit. Would that make it an accessory dwelling unit? Or at what point, and you guys said when you close the door and lock it off, but what if it's my grandkids living down there and they just don't want grandma walking up and down, right? So is it when you start renting it? Is it when at what point? We talked about what if somebody's living down there who's working for you and not really renting? Does that count? So I think that having a good discussion about of what the heck we actually mean when we're talking about the regulations we're trying to put forth, right? So that, I think, is that didn't make any sense. And then, yeah. The only other thing, and I have had a private talk with at least one of the other commissioners about the draft that went to the township board did not include a long enough, if you're going to rent it, that you have to have at least a 6-month, I would say a 6-month to really 1-year lease, because what is our intention? And that's where we go back to the master plan. If the intention of doing this is just because some people want it, then that's not good enough, right? If the intention is to expand housing choices and affordability, then let's design it to expand housing choice and affordability, not just, this person wants to do this. We had a young guy here going, I have a house, I can barely afford it, I'm in a multifamily zoning, I'd like to put something, I think he said, I don't know if he said in his basement or outside, but I'd like to have an accessory dwelling unit that doesn't cost me a ton so I can afford to live in the house I live in. Okay, is that what we're talking about? Because we're talking about affordability, right? So I think we need to kind of start over with, when we talk about accessory dwelling unit, Dan, I'm going to go back to natural areas, my last meeting of the township board. Everybody said, I voted for this natural area because I thought it meant this and I thought it meant this. We need to define first what we mean by it before we can sell it to anybody else or design an ordinance. That's my thought. Now, Dan Paulson, do you want to have a turn?
No, I don't really have anything to add. I think those are important considerations, and I think we need to do a lot more work on it. And I think all of the suggestions that have come up so far are good ones. We just need to sit down and work through them.
Hey, hi, Pete.
Hi, Tina. Sorry.
So first of all, I have to ask you a question, because you weren't here for the conflict of interest part. I want you to talk about whether or not you believe you have a conflict of interest. I also have been very vocal before I got on the planning commission, but I can't do it in my neighborhood because it's deed restricted, right? So can you talk to whether or not you believe you have a conflict of interest on accessory dwelling units and what that means?
I don't know if I have a conflict of interest. I think it comes down to this group talking about it and whether there's, the lawyers or whoever for the township. But I do have an interest, whether I actually do one at some point or not. I have an interest because the size of my property and the way my family situation is. I would have an interest in building a smaller, separate ADU on my property that my wife and I would live in, and then one of our children would live in the larger property, in the larger home. And so I do have a self-interest. And so if that constitutes a conflict of interest by itself, I have one. So I don't know how to interpret that. So I may never do this. I may never actually, build a smaller home on there, but because of the way our property is in our family, I would not want to divide the property if I could find a way not to. So I think you and I have had that one-on-one conversation about that.
So do you...
So I think it's possible that I have one. I just don't really understand all of the explicit details of what would constitute a conflict of interest. So.
Any thoughts by staff?
Your bylaws state that if you think you may have a conflict of interest, to reach out to the legal team and let them decide.
So let's do that. I think for tonight, it's general enough. We're just saying, are we going to go forward with this or are we not? And if we have some ideas. And it's hard because, and some of it, I guess we'll wait and see what legal says, but I think it could be at some point where you have to say, I pull myself away, because we all say, we're not going to do detached accessory buildings. That would be where you have to go, I'm done, right? I mean, I can't keep arguing it. Or I have to say, I am agree that this round we are not going to do, right? So somehow, but for now, I think, are you guys okay with it for now? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I feel like we're all here because we're trying to do right by our community, right? And if we feel that this is a good thing for our zoning ordinance to include, whether we have personal plans to do it or not, I don't feel that that's a conflict. I think if you own, Anderson Construction Company or something, and you plan to build 300 ADUs as part of your business plan, the second this gets adopted, that'd be a little different story. But full disclosure, Dennis, somebody shared with me that you have interest in establishing.
Yeah.
I think you've mentioned that before.
I've mentioned it in the past.
I don't feel that
to be
constitutes a
transparent.
conflict.
I've also
personally.
mentioned it and spoken quite a bit about it, but I can't do it in my neighborhood, so I think I'm safe.
I have come, before I was on the commission,
Yes.
I came at the public hearing and spoke in favor of
That's why I
certain
wanted to
things.
make sure that we called that out. And so we'll have, if you could check with legal, I believe legal will say that at what point you think that maybe you need to self-disclose because you're having a hard time making decisions that aren't
Right.
personal, if everybody's okay with it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what we'll do then. I just wanted to make sure it was on the record. Okay, so now, you did already talk, didn't you?
Already talked.
Okay, good. So we're ready to move forward. I don't know that we need a motion to say we're going to move forward. Can we just direct you, or
Sure, I'll take
or would you
direction.
like what would you like?
You don't need a formal motion, but if there's a certain direction you'd like to go with this as far as preparatory documents for next time, or there's been a significant discussion about what threshold or what part of the spectrum the planning commission would like to try to target, whether that be attached versus detached, or lot size versus district, what have you. I guess I'll take a little more direction on any analysis or research you want done in that area. We've covered it pretty extensively in the past, so I don't mind bringing that back as well. So I guess just whatever direction you'd like to direct staff, we can work towards.
Where do we allow multifamily that's moderate and high density, or just high? That's what I thought. Okay, I didn't know if you changed that on me in the last 18 years. Then I would like some kind of look at what that would be in those two areas. I'm thinking only attached. I mean, I'm thinking only attached because of the space, right? Those are the smaller lots.
It's half an acre for lot size.
Yeah. Right. But there are duplexes there, right? Yes, so anywhere there's duplexes allowed, it seems like that would be something to at least look into. Don't know if anybody will agree with me, but I think that's a place to look into that might have the least impact, because there's an expectation of a higher density. And several of you said larger parcels, right?
I think, thinking back to Lloyd Morris also spoke about his desire to he's got a large parcel and have the ability to have, I don't know, he had a bigger plan, I think, or bigger thoughts about more than one ADU on his property, but I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Yeah.
Thinking back and listening to what he was talking about, he had.
You also missed an idea that Chris had, and tell me, Chris, you are allowed to tell me if it's wrong, where you would be, if you were going to build a separate one, it would have to be basically in double the density, well, basically it would be that you'd have to be able to split it if you had to, right?
I think we talked about that, you and I, maybe, at some point I've had a conversation with someone about that, I don't know maybe who it was, but that if you had a unattached, it would need to meet zoning requirements as though it
were attached.
It were,
Okay.
now, not as though it were attached, as though it
I
were
mean,
a separate
It's
parcel.
separate parcel. Yeah.
Right.
Can I shed some light on that?
Yeah.
Okay. When you guys are talking about accessory dwelling units, at least as you have in the past, the maximum size of an ADU is going to be 960 square feet, because that was the threshold for a primary dwelling. So having this discussion of being able to put in a detached ADU on the same property as a principal, you would not be able to meet zoning requirements, because you wouldn't be able to meet the minimum threshold for a primary dwelling unit. So it's details like that I guess we could flesh out the further you get down. The broad strokes that I think staff would appreciate is making determinations on if you want to do it by district, or you want to do it by lot size, or if you want to only do attached versus attached and detached. Those major broad strokes. Then we can bring forth a draft ordinance again, and we can start picking apart the little details that way. Is, from a process standpoint, what would be, in my opinion, the best situation moving forward.
I want to say I don't like the size either.
That's fine.
I forgot that one. Because I'm going to use my basement. I keep using my basement, right? Basement is about 1,000 square feet, same as my main level, because that's typically what happens, right? Your basement's the same. And so I would have had to cut out, I think, 25 feet somewhere to meet, and for what purpose, right? So, anyway.
Cody, it seems like the less structured it is, less parameters we put on it, the more it's going to make it so that we can really evaluate it. So if we start out by saying, include these restrictions, include these parameters, we're sort of getting ahead of ourselves, I think.
That's understandable. My only pushback to that is staff doesn't know what to provide you if it's too open-ended. The discussion is great. I think amongst the 7 of you, figuring out the next step forward is correct. I just don't know what to bring you if I don't have parameters around it.
Well, I agree with Tina, and again, now I think I'm getting closer to being in a conflict. But I think that size limitation, I agree with her, was arbitrarily picked. And so I think that I wouldn't put a specific size limitation on it. I think that, I don't know how you would do that in your research anyways, so.
Maybe a better approach would be this. Earlier, Tina mentioned trying to define a little bit better of a vision that the Planning Commission has. And I know staff educates a lot when we say zoning ordinance amendments need to be clear of intent, practical, and enforceable. And so if you have a clear intent of what you're looking for out of a zoning ordinance, staff can then craft that zoning ordinance to meet that intent. But right now, I don't have a clear picture on what you're looking for moving forward.
So I can reflect back on a discussion with the 80-acre piece just past the fire barn, right behind the fire barn, where people were concerned instead of 61 houses, it would be 122. And so I would say maybe to limit that if there are areas that are specifically designed or constructed as single-family, that you look at only attached, and if there are areas that are other zoning that allow and I'm not sure how to define this, but a different density that's not specifically, 1 acre, 1 lot, 1 house, if there's more than 2 or more than 5 where you would be able to actually divide it, then look at whether you could have attached there. So maybe look at detached and attached differently as you look through it.
And that brings, can I say, just a second? I get it first. So kind of back to the meeting, there was a lot of discussion about you have this, you move into a single-family neighborhood and you have an expectation of single-family homes, right? So in my mind, it's almost like the two ends of the scale. So you're in the districts that allow duplexes, and you go, well, there isn't an the people buying might, but in reality, there isn't an expectation of having single-family homes only. You get to larger pieces of property, or, whatever it is, ag or recreation, there's not an expectation of single-family homes. And so it's almost like the two ends of the spectrums make the most sense to me. But those are the ones I would like investigated, please.
My question, kind of, I guess, for Pete, you talked about, that if you could split it, but if you can't split it because of zoning purposes, do you kind of mean like if there's a 1 acre lot, which is like a low-density residential lot size, 1 acre minimum, if that lot was 2 acres, even though maybe it couldn't be split, is that what you kind of meant? Like it's double the density? So, double the size of what the actual lot size is? So like in agricultural, you would need 4 acres, or, you know what I mean, like you're doubling. I don't know if that's what you meant by that, or maybe I'm off.
Not specifically.
Okay.
I was trying to just maintain a sensitivity to the people that were already in a neighborhood and their expectations. I guess maybe that's a better way.
You know, you wouldn't have 161 houses in there, you know, you wouldn't have double because they're all acre lots. So that wouldn't work. You would need 2 acres on it, you know what I mean? That's kind of what.
Sorry, Matt, you didn't have a mic, so if anybody's watching, the question that's being asked is your point to keep the same dwelling unit to acre ratio that we have currently, which in low density would be 1 dwelling unit for 1 acre? You're saying in order to get an ADU permitted, you'd have to have 2 acres. That's the question that you're asking.
Do you think I answered it?
Sure.
I think you're asking pretty appropriate, rigid zoning regulatory questions, and I'm answering in more of an emotional feeling way that I think what's least disruptive to the people that are already there is important. So it's not as good of an answer as you probably would want, but.
So, I'm going to really screw things up now. Big surprise. So, when you talked about the old zoning administrator, anyway, family compounds,
Oh, Lloyd?
like, because, so what is where Buttleman's is for sale by the beach, by Taylor Park? That's just low density or lake residential?
It's Lake Residential.
Non-conforming?
It's also got a Hamlet overlay zone.
Oh, it does, okay.
Yeah, it's a unique piece of property. It's the only piece of property in the township with those 2 characteristics.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is something to consider, maybe, talk about, where it's not an accessory dwelling unit, but it's some kind of a compound that has to be sold together. So, just thinking, I'm just throwing things out there, people. That would be different than ADUs.
I would support what Tina said earlier about if we're going to allow ADUs, I would like the concept that this is not short-term rental, that this is
Nope.
something where people live.
That's the whole purpose, yes.
So I feel like the simplest way to approach this is by zoning district. And I know we all kind of I have no interest in developing an ADU for whatever that's worth, but who knows? Maybe I'll, have to have another emergency back surgery and that'll change tomorrow, but it feels like the lakefront properties are already under a tremendous amount of strain. So, just looking at the zoning districts in the township, just trying to kind of attack it like that. Conservation recreation, it's a minimum of 5 acres, yes, in my mind.
Yep.
Agricultural, 2 acres, maybe, I don't know, is that really a good use for agricultural property? And then we get a natural lakefront, those are 2 acres, maybe. Low-density residential, no, I don't, that doesn't make sense to me. Lake residential, like I said, the lake areas are already under tremendous strain, no. Moderate density residential, no. High density residential, no. Local business, no, that's not a commercial use, no. General business, no, that's a commercial use. So we're left with, in my mind, 3, conservation recreation, 5 acre minimum, agricultural, 2 acre minimum, natural lakefront, 2 acre minimum.
So what about moderate and high density? You don't like that?
I don't, because those are set up, I feel, as single, again, getting back to my thought that this would almost be like a township pilot, if you will, that we would try this in these zoning districts that would be logically the least impactful to the surrounding property owners to give it a test drive, if you will, and see how it goes.
My concern there is intent, again, right? The intent, in my mind, and you know this, is to provide more options for affordable housing. I agree with your assessment that I heard at the township board meeting, which is when you assume you're moving into a single-family, neighborhood, that's what it should be. That's why I didn't like short-term rentals too, right? But I look at the moderate and high density as the places where you could build a duplex instead of a home. And when you buy in those, you know that. And those are the places where really people living there could, if they can even afford to do something that would create an accessory dwelling unit within their home, right? Within the attached, one way or the other. Those are the people who are most likely to be able to offer the most affordable things. I think the other stuff, I'm gonna get on my little high horse. It's not very high because I'll probably fall off, but I'm not doing this. My intention for this type of ordinance is not to create more advantages for people who are already advantaged. My reason for wanting to do this is to help for nurses at the hospital, for teachers at the schools, for people who really can't, grandkids coming back, or kids, I'm sorry, I'm old, kids coming back once they go off to school, right? So that's why I was thinking more of those districts. That's like the opposite. I don't mind doing both, but my intention for thinking accessory dwelling units need to be in Long Lake Township is to help with housing.
Practically speaking, I think that is going to be a very uphill climb at the township board level. So I would very much hate for this group and staff to spend a voluminous amount of time recreating public charrettes and input meetings to draft something that I don't feel is going to be supported at the township board member. Again, I'm only one vote on that
So
board.
do you mean
though.
you, or do you mean everybody?
That's why I say, I'm only one vote on
Okay.
that board. But my perception, based on, the conversations that we've had at the township board level, I don't think that will be supported because there's just too many unknowns and too many what-ifs. So that's why I'm saying, I feel practically, and I would be glad to support this, in an area with larger parcels that are going to be least impactful to a traditional single-family subdivision type setting, I think those are the districts that make sense to me, to try it, get a couple built, see how it goes. But it's,
Dan, do you think that the township board in general would be more open because of that as well? I mean, as you read the room there?
I do, because, the scenario that plays out in my mind is you have a fully developed subdivision that's been there for decades, and now people can just all of a sudden build another home for whatever reason, whether it's an altruistic reason, you're trying to, help your fellow man by providing, an affordable housing unit. You have a, elderly relative that needs a place to live, or you're just doing it for money, There's nothing wrong with making money, there's nothing wrong with that. But for somebody that bought a home in a single-family neighborhood, and now we've moved the goalpost tremendously with the wave of a wand, the township saying, you know what, now you can put 2 houses on your parcel. That, to me, is very un-American, and that, to me, is very concerning. This is not some, very high-density, first-ring subdivision of, Detroit. This is a very rural community. How many tax parcels do we have in our township? 2,700 of them? Yeah.
Over 4,000, less than 5,000? I
Okay.
don't remember the exact number.
So,
It's like 5,700.
and we heard this going through the deliberations, how many realistically are going to be built a year? A handful? Are we going to solve the world's affordable housing issue if we make this change, very extreme, what was proposed, or something much more palatable that I'm suggesting? No. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
How many high-density housing, or how much high-density zoning is there in Long Lake Township?
There's just that little corner up there
Yeah.
in the.
So how would ADUs
Orange.
work in high-density? High-density, when I think of high-density, I'm thinking of condos or site condo. How would ADUs fit into a high-density zoning situation?
Most of our high density is already developed, isn't it?
What do
Yeah.
you mean by developed?
Well, it's up in the corner where the apartments are, right?
Yes, M72 is in a high-density parcel. but-
M72 and Bukai, that's high density. Yeah.
The reason I asked the question, I don't see how ADUs would apply in a high-density situation.
Well, there was a young guy here at the board meeting saying that he lived in one of the, well, I think it was medium density, but back here somewhere. Do you guys remember where he lived?
Well, yeah.
Anyway, so he's like, I just want to take my basement and fix it up, and then I can rent it out to somebody.
Yeah, I'm just asking about high density, because I think medium density is a different situation.
There's very little high
Yeah,
density.
to me, I think we could just take high density off the table. I don't see
Okay.
how those fit. I would be more interested in learning more about what a medium density scenario would look like. And I would be interested in learning more about differentiating between separate houses and attached ADUs, because I think attached ADUs would have less of an impact on a neighborhood.
Correct.
than
That's really the only thing I would want in the medium density,
Right,
anyway.
okay.
Yeah.
So I'd like to keep that on the table, just to talk about it, just to understand it better.
When we first got into this, I think it was Cody that I had reached out to with, it'd be great if we could start this for like new developments moving forward. What's the one down here at the fire station? It's under construction right now, So like you're buying into that, when you're purchasing there, that this is a possibility. You're not going to be surprised some night when you come home and, well, somebody built a garage in your subdivision. I understand that created a bit of a fervor. And now there's a
It
little.
was just the way they built it,
You
that
know,
they came and put in a bunch of dirt that
It's
went
just
on the neighbor's.
one
yard.
example, a garage, now if somebody's building a house in there, that's a whole different kettle of
I'm not talking about building
fish.
houses, I'm talking about using the deck, what's already there.
Yeah, I know. I'm not talking about your scenario.
Yeah.
I'm just saying in general on a
But that is
residential.
that is
Yeah.
all I would approve. That is my scenario. In the larger ones, I can see, but again, it comes back to, and we don't have to do this tonight, except we have to help Cody know what to look at. What is our intent? What is our intent? If our intent is to have accessory dwelling units, people can already put kitchens in there, a second kitchen in their house if they have room to do that. They can already have a separate spot for grandma to live or the person who's taking care of them to live. They can already do that. So what is our intent of even doing this? And I think we have to get to that before we know where to go with it, right?
Would it be reasonable to maybe look at that as the next step, as maybe a targeted list of questions, points that staff brings us that, hey, this is something,
What the heck are you talking about?
maybe not, the first step is bringing a draft ordinance for us to review. It's, a framework of points that we need to work through to get to that draft, or to help you get to that draft.
Cody, I'm happy to work with you on that because that's kind of a lot of what I do in my work.
And maybe,
Is think of questions like that.
maybe something else to consider would be a joint meeting with the board. So, so nobody's blindsided.
Yeah,
You know?
I agree with that, after we develop
Get to a point.
some
Or
kind
maybe
of
they're,
a structure. yeah.
maybe they participate in that
The intention.
first step. I think, there might be ways to start off on strong footing.
Yeah, because really, this isn't something we have to do, right? And so if we are going to do it, if we're putting it as a priority, what is this priority that we're thinking of? What are we imagining when we're imagining the priority? Because I think we are, it's pretty clear, we're all thinking of what that even means. And so how are we supposed to go to anybody to approve it if we don't even know what it is we're talking about, right? Those of us sitting on this board don't happen to be right now anyway. Like you said, we're a back surgery away, right? From being in a situation where these are things we have to do. So we have to be thinking about the younger people that we're trying to get into this, make sure they can come back to the community, thinking about the tradespeople, the people who are having a really, really hard time finding places to live. And that's why your first draft, I was very much against for just the reason that it was short-term. I want it to be, and Dennis, I know you had some concerns about, well, what if I rent and they don't stay, but we can work that kind of thing out. This needs to be housing for people, not vacation properties, not, whatever. Places people can rent and actually have homes, in my mind, right? If not, then why are we doing it?
That's wonderful what you said. I think something else, I just want to put this out there that we might come up with some great idea, the township board might support it, but these folks have to deal with it day in, day out.
Sure.
They have to enforce it, they have to deal with the complaints, they have to be able to defend this in the court of law. I mean, so there's that too, and that is something that the original one that was brought to the township board, God bless you, I could just see there being a tremendous amount of unintended consequences that would come out of that, as we're experiencing from the short-term rental experiment, if you will. Some of the things that have come out of that we hadn't anticipated. But, we're building a better mousetrap every time something comes up. We really haven't had any new complaints, at least that I'm aware of, with the short-term rentals, but.
So I really like Bob's idea of, actually having a part of a meeting set aside on the agenda to explore what is the value in adding something to our zoning ordinance that isn't even here, right? And then kind of go through what is the value, and then what needs to be touched to get to that value.
Tina, I just wanted to speak on Dan. I think this summer, we just talked about it the other day, we may have had 3 to 4 complaints on short-term rentals the entire summer, and that's it.
That's
So-
because we shut them all down.
Oh, there's still 100. But we haven't had that many new ones at all, and I think you were right about the market with them. They're kind of just, so those have not been an issue for us at all, so I don't know where that's coming from, but it has not been this summer.
But it could come back.
Well, you can say that about
Because I could
anything.
find campsites
You can say
that I
that
could
about
never
anything.
find this year, so I think people aren't doing the same things, but yeah. So Cody, are you comfortable with, and like I said, I can help work with you on questions if you want.
So just to reiterate, what I'm hearing is the planning commission is asking staff to create a questionnaire to help clarify your intent of ADUs moving forward, and there's a potential of having a joint meeting with the board or sending the questionnaire to the board as well to have them give their input before too much work is put into it.
After we at least see it the first time, yes.
Okay.
Because, there's a possibility we all sit here and go, eh,
Yeah, I am not enthusiastic about a joint meeting with the board at this point.
no. not
I
yet.
think that we need to get whatever, if we're going to have consensus on something, and as you just said, maybe it wouldn't even go to the board if our consensus is this doesn't
Right,
work.
right.
But just in listening to people, and you talked about intent, I've just been writing notes. Financial, I can see why people would do this financial, altruism, I can see why people would do that. Density, some people are in favor of higher density for that purpose. I can see why people would do that. Convenience, if you're living there and you want someone to help you, so family support, and control. Control your property if you don't want to split it, if you want to keep control of it. So I think there are a lot of varied intents about why people would do this. So just in listening to all of that, I got 5 already.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
And none of those are bad.
Right.
They're all very realistic, The one scenario that I do keeps getting painted with the ADU discussion though is, the idea of a granny flat. Granny's not going to be here forever, then what?
Oh, yeah, she is.
Then what? Then you've dumped $400,000 into the structure. You're not just going to let it sit there and let trees grow through it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, do you feel like you have enough direction? Do you want to Do you want?
At this time, I'm taking the direction of creating a questionnaire so PC members can help clarify their intent.
I don't
going
even know
forward.
that I'd call it a questionnaire, but a list of discussion questions that I can facilitate a discussion around those questions. That, Dennis, you've been quiet.
I'm taking all this.
I'm hanging with the idea that you do it by lot size.
Okay, that's fine.
And then, but, yeah, that's where I'm at. But these other questions, I've been writing down things, what would the purpose of them be? I've come up with 4, but
Good.
I don't think we'll have a hard time defining it.
Okay, good. Everybody okay with moving on? Any have more discussion? All right, then. I think we'll come out with a really good product if we decide to do a product. Let me get to the next thing here. The next discussion, business, is permeable materials in Lake Residential District review and discussion. Again, Cody?
So one of the things we try to do as staff is bring to light some requests that we get from residents, and this is one that our zoning office gets questioned on frequently. And to explain it a little bit, I'll just start with, in our Lake Residential, and Matt, if you don't mind pulling up the zoning map for me, that would be helpful at the moment. In Lake Residential, which is around Long Lake, Bass Lake, a few others. It's the technical difficulties. It's the, here we go. It's the dark blue lots here around the township. So there's Humano, Caulfield, a couple other lakes that we have around Fern. Currently, in this district, we have a 50-foot waterside setback, meaning any structure has to be 50 feet away from the ordinary high water mark. There's exceptions to that rule, like there isn't anything, and one of those exceptions is you are allowed to build a deck that encroaches into that waterside setback up to a total square footage of 300 square feet. Now, that deck has to be between 6 inches and 60 inches off the ground, and it cannot encroach on the side setbacks in any way, shape, or form. One of the things that the zoning office is getting a lot of questions on is, hey, we're building a patio, it's not a deck, but we'd like to go further in to the waterside setback like somebody like a deck can currently do. And there are permeable surfaces, either pavers or concrete, that would allow the same infiltration rate as a traditional wood decking or similar material decking. Why can't we do that? And our answer as staff is because the zoning ordinance doesn't allow you to. So with that increase in frequency, we as staff are open to spending the time of going down the rabbit hole of figuring out infiltration rates and materials and practical applications of allowing this or not allowing this. But before we do so, we want to make sure that there's even appetite to look at this further. This is not an item, it's so specific that it's not something that's outlined in the master plan. So we have no direction on it other than we're receiving numerous amounts of requests. And Matt, I'll let you speak to the volume of said requests, but it's got to the point that it's definitely the most requested item from the zoning office. So we're bringing it for you today to educate you a little bit, but also to say, hey, before we do all this background work, is there even appetite to discuss this further? And I think the recommendation from the zoning office would be, if we were to investigate this further, it's not to expand what's allowable to be encroached, but just change the material that's allowed in that encroachment. So that is what we're bringing forth today, and I'm open to questions and discussion on that.
Anybody want to go first?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I would agree not to increase the space. One of the things we forget, and I'm a member of,
let me start here. I'm a member of 5 different lake associations, and the reason I do that is to learn what other lakes are doing. And the trend seems to be to go to more natural shorelines and have bioengineered shorelines. But when you start expanding into the area, the 50-foot area in most cases in our community, you're taking away the natural ability of the land to filter and so on, take care of the lake. And I will go back to other things that I've talked about before, that we're on track for having a completely hardened shoreline in the next less than 50 years. So we're working in the opposite direction right now on our lakes. Yeah, so my biggest thing is I wouldn't expand the ability to use that area with structure. And I would look at other ways also to add to the filtration types of shoreline that you might have to add if you're putting in different areas, different types of materials.
Dennis, I apologize. One key factor I forgot to mention is in order to be allowed for that 300 square foot encroachment, you have to have 1,500 square foot of natural area or natural vegetation. So there is kind of a give and take. You have to make sure you set aside that 1,500 square feet to be granted that 300 square foot encroachment.
Right, you're right. I remember that, but I don't want to see, in my view, I don't want to start going the other direction and increasing that. Yeah.
I support what Dennis said, but probably would go a little further and say that I would consider changing the setback to 100 feet as it is on the natural lakes. I mean, if what we're doing on the natural lakes is meant to support the lakes and the lake infrastructure and the lake's ability to preserve itself and filter and do the things that, that we're doing, and we're looking at hardened frontage. I get that, historically, people built right up to the edge of Long Lake, and 50-foot setback is, better than a 10-foot setback, but I would say that I would support new construction having a 100-foot setback. But all of the other things that Dennis said, I also support. So, and then I do have questions about those permeable things because I don't have much personal knowledge of them, but my expectation is they get plugged. But that's ignorance, that's not knowledge. So I'm guessing that they don't last forever.
So when I read, do you want to go next? Go ahead.
I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, Pete, you just brought up what I was going to mention too. I think the big thing to realize is that the permeable pavers, if you will, require maintenance, and when maintenance fails, they become plugged. Then you essentially have a impermeable surface. If you have a deck that's elevated, minimum of 6 up to 60, the rain can fall through the deck boards, but it's still all natural ground underneath that, or it's available to accept the runoff of the deck itself. So I guess that's something to recognize, that maintenance issue, permeable pavements in general in this area are prone to failure due to lack of maintenance. So I think Dan would probably agree to that too.
Okay, here's what I was thinking. So I remember back when we started allowing decks at all in any of this area, or any, that kind of structure, long time ago. Bob was probably 12 when you were on the planning commission and we talked about that.
No.
And I remember going, yeah, but then they're going to be digging up everything because they're going to be putting in posts and things like that. And the discussion was more around the fact that the rain could get through. So this talks about stormwater, but I don't know that that's really what the problem is with people. You know, it's the fact that every piece of vegetation filters in a way that these things can't filter. So even if it's got all the gravel and all the things and the maintenance isn't terrible, it doesn't allow for the filtering through the vegetation that's the most important. And so that's what I kept hearing or seeing when I was thinking about when I was reading it, so I guess that's a question, if you want to answer the question, because it's still like a bunch of concrete stuff that's going in and rock stuff instead of plant stuff. Thoughts? Either of you, have you heard anything about that or thought it?
Staff's education on this is fairly rudimentary as well. That's part of the reason why we're bringing it up to you. We hear it every day. And we don't necessarily have a formed opinion one way or the other, what we would educate or instruct. We did not want to put a bunch of time and effort into pursuing this if there wasn't any temperature to discuss this further. So that's why we're bringing it to you now with a little bit of background that we do have. And the background we do have is people are asking for it. Whether or not it's a good idea from a zoning perspective, I guess we'll leave that up to you to let us know if you have any temperature that way of pursuing it further. Because we will, if we do pursue this further, we will have to bring in subject matter expertise that have a bit better knowledge on this information. And there's folks available to do that. We've either at Benzie Conservation District or Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy or Soil District. There's all sorts of folks with this knowledge that we can bring in. But I and Matt did not want to pursue that further and spend the time and energy on that if it wasn't a topic of discussion. Because again, this isn't something driven by the master plan or driven by a priority. It's driven by the fact that we've seen a lot of requests for it.
Dan, do you have any?
How many requests are on the request?
I mean, multiple weekly at times. I mean, I see lots of contractors and landscape design architects that tell me, I can't believe you guys allow treated wood that's worse for the water than a piece of stone that's, you know what I mean, that if we can filter it properly, and it's worse for the lake. So, I mean, I get that side of it. We allow composites, we allow, you know, but again, without being able to go down the rabbit hole of these materials and vet what we would allow, what we wouldn't, we talk about, we want to make sure we can enforce it. We want to make sure that what they're telling me they're using, we have a scale for, so it's not just someone telling me it's gonna, filter water. I mean, gonna have to have some sort of measuring stick for it. So, and, but we didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. But it's a lot. I mean, it's more than any other request that I get out of anything. It'd be, and the landscapers that they're shocked we don't allow, which doesn't mean anything, but that's, but apparently we're the only ones that don't allow it according to them, so,
In the whole world.
Yeah, I guess, but it's, that's why. I mean, it's when you get enough of them, it's time to at least bring it up and see if we can do something or if not, but that's not our decision, I
Can you
guess.
give me a couple of examples of, because I'm not sure I exactly understand what it is they want or don't want to do.
Can you pull up the setback illustration, please? Article 12, front page. Okay, so if you look on the screen, on the right side diagram, this is out of Article 12, out of the zoning ordinance, Lake Residential. This is a mock parcel, it's not any particular parcel, where you have water on the north side, water on the south side, road frontage on the north side, and then the east and west is your side setbacks. So currently how the zoning ordinance is written is they could build the structures how they have them there, and then they're building a deck or a patio on the south side of the dwelling unit. And the zoning ordinance allows them to encroach into that 50-foot setback up to a total of 300 square feet if you set aside 1,500 square feet for natural vegetation. So the question we're getting, or I guess the zoning office is getting, is that 300 square feet that you're allowed to encroach has to be 6 inches off the ground, no more than 60 inches above why can't we put a patio there that would allow the same infiltration? And that's why we keep explaining the current ordinance doesn't allow them to do that. And we keep getting asked to bring that up to commissioners to have a discussion about that. There is valid arguments for permeable materials not staying permeable, with whether it's maintenance or whether it's technology. There's all sorts of rabbit holes we could go down. Instead of staff vetting all those rabbit holes, before we even wanted to spend time on that, we wanted to bring it up to the 7 of you and say, hey, this is something that we've been asked for a lot. We don't know if it's good, bad, or otherwise, but do you want us to spend time and effort going down this, or are we comfortable with the current zoning how it is? Does that help add clarification?
Yeah. Do you have an answer for that part about the treated lumber?
But, it's not necessarily, I mean, we need to learn these things, and it's not necessarily the materials you're using. If they're permeable, that may be good, but, and again, we talked about, or I mentioned not expanding it. But when you set aside the natural vegetation net, do we enforce that? Do we even know what's going on with that?
So when they come in and they want a waterside deck now, we will map out the 1,500 square feet from our mapping on the computer to make sure that they have, that there. I haven't had any yet that's like, brand new, where they haven't had any, no vegetation on the ground yet or whatnot. A lot of shorelines with the 50-foot setback, they have 1,500 square feet, no problem. You know what I mean? So, but they provide that to us in a plot plan when we issue those permits. So, and again, I can measure it from my Connect Explorer on the screen and then get a pretty good approximate. 1,500 square feet doesn't take much, it doesn't seem like on these lots, so. But we do vet it.
Go ahead.
But we don't have a way of following up and enforcing over the years.
I mean, I'm not going back to every property.
No, so
After, so no, but that you could say that for anything. I mean, you could say that for anything that's constructed. I mean, there could be ADUs in a ton of houses now. I don't know.
So I want to follow up with, have a similar question. What do you define, or is it defined anywhere, what native vegetation is for this? Is this lakefront, wetland? Is this
very gray,
an oak tree? Is this, what's native vegetation here?
I don't know if it is.
I hope it's not monoculture grass required.
Well, we did have a gentleman tell us that grass is a native vegetation.
I bet you would. Yeah, right.
Well, he was with an environmental company, so, grass grows natively, I guess.
So if you don't mow it,
I'm not an arborist.
like me.
Well, yeah, what happens when, the house is sold and the new guy comes in, he's like, that's ugly, I want, lawn.
Yeah.
And it's, seeded and manicured lawn.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's out there.
Sure it is.
So the question is, before us, is there an appetite to look into this more, to make any changes to what is existing in the ordinance, or no?
So my, I don't know if this is an answer, this is a thought process, but if there were good ways to ensure that this 1,500 square feet was improving the process for lake clarification, then I think it'd be a good trade, because right now I don't see much of that going on. And so if there was a way to say, we're going to give you 300 square feet of permeable patio, but you've got to give back 1,500 square feet of something defined that's going to improve the quality of the lake, I think that'd be a fair trade.
I think that I think we need to define exactly what native grasses are, though, because there are not a lot of grasses native to Michigan that are mowable. They're mostly sedge grasses and so on. I'd like to see a better definition of that.
Well, of all the native materials, right? So,
Yeah.
what?
Number 6 is the definition.
Oh, that's not good enough.
The natural vegetation in the zoning ordinance is defined in the definition section. Native vegetation is defined as, native vegetation refers to grasses, wildflowers, shrubs, trees, and other plant life that grows naturally in a certain region and climate that are indigenous to the area and are not invasive species. That's how it's listed in the zoning ordinance.
Well, that's hard to figure out, isn't it, Matt?
So this is the question. This is why staff didn't want to drill down and do a bunch of time to work on this. The other option is to not have staff work on this yet and bring in a subject matter expert for you that might be able to speak to best practices if this is something you're willing to put time and effort into. That said, you got to weigh your priorities. We have some application reviews that I will tell you are coming up this fall, and then we have other competing priorities. So that's why when we bring it to you, we're trying to understand which of those competing priorities do you want to tackle.
Were you going to say something? No, you, Bob.
The thought crossed my mind is, why are we allowing encroachments into the setback in the first place? And would there be any, would it be easier for you guys to just redefine what the setback is and disallow encroachments?
Encroachments are allowed for decks, porches, and patios in all districts up to a certain size or up to a certain district. So encroachments are fairly common when it comes to decks, porch, and patios in your current zoning ordinance. Whether or not something is easier for us, I don't think we really have an opinion on. It would be what's ever best for the township moving forward. This is strictly a materials question, whether or not we would allow a different material in the same encroachment we currently have. And I don't know the impact on the natural vegetation that would have. I don't know if impervious surfaces get clogged up and then they're ineffective, or if it's something that would last 10 years, 20 years. I don't have that subject matter expertise on it. So we'd have to figure that out in order to have a more educated conversation on that.
Yeah, I'd like to learn more about what the previous materials are they're talking about, because I know there are some that I know are going to get clogged. Are they talking about flagstone? Are they talking about pavers? I also think it would be a benefit to the applicants to have an actual list of plants that are allowable, because it's so gray the way it is. It's pretty easy to go wild with it. I know that's more work for staff, but I think that could be farmed out to an outside expert.
So I just want to make sure I'm hearing correctly. Would it be accurate to say that what I'm hearing is, as your agenda allows, you would be open to hearing from a subject matter expert regarding permeable surfaces and a water side setback, so that you could make a better decision on whether or not you want to pursue this further?
I think that's our responsibility.
I'd say yes to
I'm
that.
going to go around, okay.
Can I answer it a little more completely? I think that should include the impact of a deck, because if there truly is not much difference between the impact of a deck and an pervious surface, that changes how I think about it. I think that the deck allows the water to go through. I think that helps. But if in fact, it's not much different, then I would want to know that.
As well as get an idea of plants, because, most grasses that we have are not native. And they're not deep-rooted that are going to help the lakefront. So maybe there's a trade-off here, so you make sure you are filtering. So getting an idea what an approved list of vegetation could be, or should be.
Dennis, do you have any experts that you'd want them to contact that wouldn't cost anything?
Well, there's a watershed biologist. He's pretty well known in the area, Rob Carner over on Glen Lake. He may be willing to speak with us. He's done for 30 years plus work on, in that community, been very successful. He's retiring this year, and search.
Oh, well, he's gonna
replace him,
wanna
but-
have
No, but
things to do.
he's a great community person, somebody that I have a lot of trust with. I can ask him if he would attend a meeting, what have you, give some ideas.
Are you okay with that, moving forward?
Yeah, I'm okay with hearing an expert. I would just want, I think the gentleman Dennis pointed out is probably well qualified. I just want to make sure we don't, have somebody that represents the permeable pavement industry.
Yes, right.
Something along those lines.
I'm very open-minded. I know there's a lot of products that have been developed and been implemented. There's probably a tremendous amount of existing studies that could be called on that might answer these questions without having to drag somebody in here. But I know that one site that comes to mind is the Meyer down in Manistee. They built large, you could actually, I think you could probably even pick it out in an aerial photograph. They built a large portion of their parking lot as like a permeable asphalt. I think it was asphalt. It's like kind of a test, and the city did a little pilot years ago down by the old original post office there off Union Street, across the street from Union, in a parking area that I don't even know if it exists anymore now that the dam's being ripped out, but they did a section of permeable concrete, permeable asphalt, and I think one section of pavers, and I think they pretty much concluded the concrete and the asphalt were not going to work for their applications, but the pavers performed quite well. So, I don't know.
Okay.
So I guess
You
I'm
want-
open-minded to the idea of,
Having a
if it's just a
discussion.
matter of
You-
material
you
difference. so
interested?
raise back.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'd like to know what kind of products the contractors and landscapers are asking for, because that's what we really have to deal with. There's a lot of information out there about treated wood and composites. Having worked in a number of construction lawsuits, materials lawsuits, I know that a lot of the claims that the manufacturers make don't necessarily bear out over time. So I think we need to be careful about decisions that we make about that.
So I think I'm hearing there's two parts. There's wanting to learn more about what other kinds of materials might be out there that would make sense. And then the other is to get a better list of what native vegetation we're talking about. So it's easier for Matt, for one thing, here's your list, and it's easier to just kind of, and it's better, right? We end up with better things, less likely to be mowed when somebody comes in. Okay, so I think that's,
Less
Right.
likely to be mowed and fertilized.
yeah, and fertilized, yes.
Can I-
And there was also mention from the gallery of maybe MSU extension as well, so, okay.
Tina, can I add one? Joe Lattimore is also someone who would be, she's a biologist, a PhD biologist, who's one of the directors of the Michigan Clean Water Corps. And she volunteered her time and came out to my lake last week and spent half a day with me looking
Oh.
at the shorelines and stuff. So,
Oh, your lake?
well, I don't know.
Just kidding. Okay, is that, you have a lot of homework, Cody?
This isn't bad.
And then it'll be as we can fit it in, because it is almost winter.
Yep.
So we have a little bit of time, anyway.
So the takeaway, just to make sure we're all on the same page, is when our agenda allows, engage with the SME, a subject matter expert, in order to discuss further their impervious surfaces, and then further to that is more discussion on native vegetation, which I will have an update for you when we get to reports, so.
Is that right? Yeah, thank you. Public comment? Anything? Oh, man, okay. No public comment. Reports, Cody, oh, no, Dan, you're first.
I think the big news, the township board really is, we're in the process of hiring a new fire chief, so that's, hasn't really involved the board much at all, but I am to understand that they had interviews and had a couple promising, hopeful candidates, and I to understand that they're they're getting close. I don't know. Maybe Heidi might even know a little bit more, but as far as I know, nothing has officially been announced as far as somebody coming in. So that's probably the biggest change that might be coming down that comes to mind. So Public safety, obviously very important to all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there a ZBA meeting? Okay, then no zoning board of appeals report, and Cody, you wanted to do a planner update report?
Yeah, I just have two brief things for you. The first is the zoning ordinance update for manufactured housing communities use as a conditional use in the local business district went in front of the township board and was passed. It was noticed per state law in the paper, so it is now effective. On your desks, you'll see that section updated for you, so you can update Article 15 in your hard copy books, so you guys are all up to date on that zoning ordinance amendment. The second thing is the ad hoc committee for tree preservation met earlier this month. That nomenclature is going to be changed to more natural feature ad hoc committee because trees is too specific, and items such as natural vegetation is one of those topics of discussion that are going to be presented to the Planning Commission as a report, so you can see the difference between pine tree and a purple lotus or whatever the vegetative plant is. So that will tie in as well to the permeable surface discussion that we have there. So those are my two updates.
Commissioner comments? Anything, Mr. Springsteen? Mr. Wyan? Mr. Verschafe? Look at him remembering people's last names. Mr. Wagner?
Oh, ma'am.
Mr. Paulson? I had a question. Now I have to remember what it was. Have you gotten anything back from the storage buildings, landscape design or anything yet? Just out of curiosity.
We got a landscape design. We had an initial meeting with them after their approval, discussing their plans to adhere to the conditions of the conditional land use. So the plantings haven't happened yet.
No, I just didn't know if they gave you like a plan or something and if you were comfortable with it.
After discussion with them, their plans to plant meet the restrictions that were placed upon them.
All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I don't have to do that, do I? All right, Paulson. Verschafe. Any discussion?